All right, so here's the conundrum. I built these doors. Don't worry, I'm doing a full video on exactly how I built these doors, coming out soon. But I ran into a little issue where I cut this arched shape just out of the wood, which it looks fine, except there's this little thin, feathery piece of wood right at the edge. I didn't like how that looked. So then I thought, well, it would be cool if I did a piece of curved sashing to fit in there. The only problem is, in order to do that, you have to be able to bend wood, which I don't have the ability to do that because I don't have a steam box. And then I was like, steam box can't be that hard to build. What if I just make one? But I'm in a time crunch. So the question I have is, can I go buy everything I need to build a steam box at the local big box store? I mean, they already got box in their names, so you gotta be able to build a steam box, right? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so we need some sort of inner tube. I think if we can get like a chimney pipe, and then we can wrap it in this stuff. That is very squeaky. 8-inch, I feel like would be good, but how do you get it off of there? So this will be the internal part that holds the steam, and then we'll wrap the insulation around it. Put a cap on it, door at the other end, I think. What is the difference? Yellow foam, natural color. There's more of this missing, which means it must be a better product. Of course. It's always the aisle you need to get to that you can't because the forklift's there. This is probably unnecessary, but I think we'll put this on the corners of our box to hold it together and make it look cool. We need some sort of latch for the door. I know the latch I want the little like chick, 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 chick. They never have what you actually need here. Scratch that, here they go.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Now, I saw in a bunch of videos where they need something off the bottom, like for wood to rest on, so it's not sitting down in a bunch of water so that the steam can get to it easier. In a few videos I watched, guys just drilled holes through the side of the box and inserted dowels. So that seemed like it worked pretty good. That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna get pine. Yes, pine. Sometimes it's the best wood for things. One more. The one thing they're not going to sell at the big box store is a dedicated steamer, which is the most important part. But they do sell a wallpaper steamer. And as far as I can tell, it's pretty much the same thing. So we're going to give this a go. Worst case scenario, we'll order a steamer on mine. Thermometer's not overkill, right? We need some sort of drain, because water's gonna build up in there with all that steam. So I think I got a combination of this little hose bib, 1/2 inch with some PVC pipe. I'm gonna try and drill a hole and maybe mount this in the back. And then the nice thing is I can close this or open it up. I can hook a hose up to it, which would be nice, and then run it out of the shop to drain, in theory. All right, now let me just stress once again that I really have no idea what I'm doing here. I've never built a steam box before. I've never even steam bent wood before. I watched a few videos online, and that's all I'm going on. So the first thing I needed to do was seal up my inner tube. Not my inner tube that you'd float down a river in, but the tube that will be on the inner portion of my steam box. So I got this metal tape, I stuck the cap on the end, and I taped her up. Next, I need to wrap my tube in this rigid foam insulation. Probably should have moved my camera before I started cutting pieces down, but whatever. The idea behind this is that it will lock in the heat and make sure that it stays nice and hot inside the steam box. So after taking measurements off my tube, ripping down some of the rigid foam on the table saw, I started cutting everything to length over on the chop saw. And I have to say, cutting rigid foam on the chop saw is kind of a treat. I mean, cuts like butter. Once I had all 4 pieces for the 4 sides of my box that I'm building, I had to figure out how to hook them all together. Now, they don't have to really stay together very strong. I just need to hold them in place until I can build a plywood box around the entire thing. So I just grabbed some CA glue and some accelerator spray, and I started gluing everything up. And it worked okay. It did kind of melt the rigid foam when I sprayed the accelerator spray on there, but it did hold it together good enough. Once I had 3 of the 4 sides in place, I grabbed my pipe and I laid it in there. So far, so good, I think. Who knows? Now, because my inner pipe is round and my rigid foam box is square, there were these triangular voids on each corner. So I decided to fill them with spray foam. This might be overkill. I mean, how much heat do we really need to trap in this box? I don't know. But any excuse to use spray foam, I jump on. Because you spray it out and then you get to watch it expand, and it's fun. It's also very messy if you're not careful. Once I got some spray foam in all of those corners, Craig helped me CA glue on the last piece of rigid foam insulation. Then, just because I wasn't confident in the CA glue holding this thing together while I moved it around, I took some tuck tape and I taped up every seam. Again, probably overkill, but that's kind of the name of the game. Then, very meticulously, and not messy at all, I took a putty knife and scraped away some of the spray foam that oozed out on the backside, and then using some more CA glue, I inserted another piece of rigid foam insulation as a little cap at the back of the box. This was kind of satisfying because it was a nice perfect fit and you gotta push it in there, kind of like those Play-Doh molds you used to play with as a kid. Anyways, once my rigid foam box was complete, it was time to wrap the entire thing in plywood. Now, the only spare plywood I had laying around was this sheet of pre-finished 3/4 inch birch ply. But if you're going to build a steam box, you might as well use fancy plywood, right? So I cut 4 pieces, all to the appropriate sizes to fit around my rigid foam box, and then using these corner clamps, I kind of held them in place. And then I used a countersink bit to countersink and drill some pilot holes. And then I inserted some 1.25 inch long screws to hook the entire thing together. Once I had that whole seam done, I flipped it over and added my back piece to help square up the box. Just countersunk and screwed this in place as well. And then I grabbed my rigid foam box just to make sure that it would fit inside my plywood box. We've kind of got a whole turducken situation going on here. Stovepipe, inside spray foam, inside rigid foam, inside plywood. Next, we're going to shove the entire thing inside of an ostrich and eat it for dinner. No, actually, that'd be really weird. Anyways, with my rigid foam box sandwiched between now a plywood box, I decided to take things up one more notch and add these metal angle iron corner caps. Again, probably completely unnecessary, but my thought process behind this was I'm not always going to have this steamer box out. I'm going to be storing it away, and I didn't want those corners to get all dinged up with me moving it around all the time. Plus, it looks all cool and industrial. Speaking of making things look cool, I didn't like how the end of this looked with the visible spray foam and the rigid foam, so I decided to make a little cap to, make it look pretty. I happen to have some 1/8 inch birch ply lying around the shop, so I cut a piece that was the exact size of the end of my box. Then using a ruler going from corner to corner, I found the dead center of that piece of 1/8 inch ply. Next, I needed to cut a perfect 8-inch diameter circle in the center of that piece of ply. And since I didn't have a hole saw that was 8 inches, I decided to use my shaper origin. So, holding it in place on the shaper station with some double stick tape, I just designed an 8-inch circle on the machine, and zip zap zoop, I had it cut out in no time. Now you can see me prying up that circle with the brand new Bourbon blade. If you haven't got one of those yet, over on my website, you can do so at bourbonmoth.com, and you better hurry because they are selling quick. Pretty soon my end cap was complete, so I squirted out a little Total Boat Thixo onto the back side to hold it in place because I didn't want to just screw it on there. I mean, you'd see the screws and we don't want this thing to be ugly. I did have to wiggle the pipe and shape it a little bit to fit perfectly inside that circle, but I got it eventually and I tapped it back into form with a hammer and I clamped the entire thing up until the Total Boat dried. I also used a little bit of the Thixo to seal around the edge where the pipe met the birch plywood because, you know, water and steam, didn't want it leaking. And now it's really starting to look like a steam box, I think. I am just uploading some plans to the website. And I like plans because they tell you exactly what you should do, where to start, where to finish. There's no guessing. Unlike life, which is a big mystery and you never know what's going to happen. That's why when you can, it's nice to prepare for things that are unknown, like getting life insurance. Now we do these Policy Genius ads a lot, and you guys have let me know that you're actually pretty happy with it. I've heard from a lot of you guys that got on Policy Genius and found great policies, because that's what it's all about, making it easy for you to find the right life insurance policy. If you don't believe me, well, just check this out. It's super simple. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. That's probably why they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, because they really are the smarter way to buy life insurance. So now that you're like, hey, this is actually pretty easy, I'm surprised. Then your next question is probably like, all right, so where do I go? What do I do? How do I sign up? Well, that part could not be simpler. You just go here. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/bourbonmoth or click the link in the description to get multiple life insurance quotes for free and see how much you can save. Huge thanks to Policy Genius for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the project. The box was not going to be very effective if I didn't have a way to trap the steam inside. So next, I needed to make a door. I took 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood and I Thixoed them together to make 1.5 inch solid piece of plywood door. And then I just bought these cheap hinges at Home Depot while I was there. I screwed them on one side so that you could open the door easily. And on the other side, I added this really cheap brass latch. Definitely gonna have to upgrade this thing later because, well, it barely works as is and it's brand new. But the important part is it'll work for now, which is important because we've got things we got to bend, like right away. We don't have any time to waste. We definitely don't have time to get some stickers with letters on them and decorate the outside of our steam box. That would just be foolish and a waste of time. So we probably shouldn't give it an awesome name and then put our logo on it. This decal is also available at bourbonmoth.com. Put it on your car, your truck, your fridge, your friends. Anyways, with the steam box now decorated, go Team Steam. Next, I needed to add my drain at the back of the box. Now, from what I understand, you angle these boxes so that all the water drains towards the back, which means once it gets there, you need to have a way to get it out. So I hooked up this little faucet system, just drilled a hole right through my plywood, my insulation, and through the back of the pipe, and then using some more Total Boat Thixo, I gooped it up real good. I even shoved my finger in there to really make sure it was lubed. This feels weird and icky. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but anything to get the job done. Then I inserted my whole hose nozzle setup thing and waited for the Thixo to dry. While I was waiting for that to dry, I decided to also insert my BBQ thermometer. The only problem was it was too long. It stuck down way too far into the steam box, so I decided just to cut off the tip of it with some wire cutters. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's going to totally destroy the thermometer and it's not going to work properly after that. But here is a fun little surprise that I found out. It actually doesn't affect it at all. See, I stuck a heat gun in there and still works totally fine. So apparently whatever technology is in the thermometer is not affected by lopping the end off. I was very curious to find out whether or not this wallpaper steamer would work to generate enough steam for our steam box. So I added some water, plugged it in, and then you have to wait 10 minutes. And boy, oh boy, did it generate way too much steam, way too fast. Thankfully, you can get on Amazon and have stuff delivered same day. So I picked up this Wagner steam generator, which is actually made for a steam box. The problem with the wallpaper steamer was the steam came out so quick that it would have only given us like 10 minutes of steam, which wouldn't have been enough. We would have been filling that thing up with water over and over again. So there's just some things that are better to buy the right thing for the job. Finally, I needed to create some sort of a rack system on the inside of the steam box to keep my pieces up off the bottom of the pipe so they wouldn't just be sitting down in water. So I drilled a bunch of holes on both sides of my box, all the way through the plywood, the insulation, and into the pipe itself. Now I meticulously measured these out on either side so they would be exactly the same on both sides. And then in theory, I could just insert a 1/2 inch dowel on one side, through the hole on the other side, and create these nice little rests all the way down the inner tube that I could set my wood on. And would you believe it? It actually worked perfect. I was amazed that I was able to get those dowels in one side and through the hole and out the other side, but no problems at all. Except when the foreman stopped by and told me I was sawing incorrectly and showed me how to do it properly. Eventually we had a bunch of dowels. I want to say like 10. I spaced them every 6 inches all the way throughout that entire tube, which created this nice rack system and would keep our pieces elevated up off of the soggy floor. Now I had created these templates to cut the arches on the top of my cabinets, and I used them like this, and they worked great to cut that arch. Now I decided those templates would work perfect to bend my internal sash pieces. So I created this other internal piece to the form, and all I have to do is take my pieces out of the steam box, stick them in this form, use some clamps to hold them in place, and let them dry. I think. Again, I've never done this before, so I'm just kind of making things up as I go. I measured the length that I would need each strip to be, roughly, and then I cut some pieces a few inches longer than that, so I'd have some wiggle room. Over on the table saw, I cut down a bunch of strips, approximately 1/4 inch thick. Then I shaped one end of them to have a nice rounded profile. That'll be the top visible part that sticks proud off of my cabinet door. Then it was time to explore our new designated steam generator. So I pulled this thing out of the box, completely disregarded the instructions because how hard could it be? And then realized that the attachment that you screw into the end of the hose wasn't long enough. But looking around my shop, I realized that the threading on that attachment was the same as the threading on all my pneumatic tools, and I had these little air hose extender pieces that were essentially just a tube, and that would work perfect. So I drilled the corresponding size hole in the back of my steamer box, I inserted this long tube apparatus, and I glued it in place with some Total Boat Fixo. Now it was time to add the steam. So I filled up the steam generator, I screwed on the hose to the back, and I turned it on and waited. Well, I didn't just stand around, I loaded up the steam box with some wood that I'm gonna bend. That's what I did. And then I waited because it takes like 15 minutes for that thing to heat up and start generating steam. This is how far I can bend these pieces now before they break. I mean, if I bend them any farther than that, they're gonna snap. So hopefully this steam is gonna do its job because we gotta bend these things quite a bit. In about 15 to 20 minutes, steam started pouring out of our box, so I knew we were on our way. We let the pieces sit in there for 25 minutes because I read online somewhere that you have to leave them an hour for each inch of thickness. And these were only 1/4 of an inch thick. So I thought 25 inches would be plenty. I pulled a piece out, I started squishing it into my form, and that's when, well, it completely just snapped. Right here. Yeah, failure. I thought 25 minutes, obviously not long enough. So I let him sit another 25 minutes. At this point, we're up to 50 minutes in the steam box. I opened it up. It was quite hot and steamy in there. Don't know why it shouldn't be working. Pulled another piece out, stuck it in the form. This time I got a little more creative with my clamping method. This worked a little better. And wouldn't you know, it started to bend a little farther. I thought we were gonna make it, and then that one also snapped. So then I waited another 25 minutes. At this point, we're up to like an hour and 15 minutes. I pulled the next piece out. I rushed over, stuck it in my form, started clamping it, and this time pretty quickly, it snapped. But when this one snapped, I realized something. It snapped directly on a knot. So I don't think it's because it couldn't bend. I think it's just because there was a knot in it, and that was a weak point. So I grabbed another piece. This piece, nice, straight grain, no knots, crystal clear, and slowly started tightening that clamp. This is quite the arm workout with this little squeeze clamp, but look at that. It fit into the form, it didn't crack or break, and it's the exact shape that we need it to be. But something is only successful if you can duplicate it. So I grabbed another piece, same exact result. So an hour and 15 minutes is more about the time that I needed to steam these to get them to bend.
Well, I would call that a success. I mean, yes, we only have 2 out of the 4 we need, but don't worry, I got more in the steam box. I learned a lot. First and foremost, if there's any knots in your pieces, don't use them because they like to break right where the knot is. We lost a couple that way. But I'll pull the other ones out of the steam box, put them in the forms, and I think we are gonna be well on our way to getting those doors done. If you wanna see the doors completely finished, I'm gonna put out a video probably next week showing the entire construction of the doors, including the bending process. Also, if you haven't got yourselves a bourbon blade yet, we are completely sold out of the first batch. They flew off the shelves, which was awesome. We're on to batch 2. So if you don't wanna be that guy seeing everybody else post pictures of their cool bourbon blades and you don't have one, well, you should go over to bourbonmoth.com and get yourself one while supplies last. I'm gonna keep bending some stuff.